Welcome back to the Good Growth Podcast, brought to you by BGF, the most active equity investor in the UK and Ireland. In this episode, Sophie Birch, Head of Non-Executive Talent at BGF, shares how she helps businesses thrive by building exceptional boards. We dive into the evolving role of non-execs, the power of a strong chair-CEO partnership, and the work Sophie's doing to promote greater diversity in the boardroom. If you want to know what it takes to build a board that drives real business growth, this episode is a must listen.
Sophie, welcome to the BGF Good Growth Podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Tell us about your role and the talent network at BGF.
So my role is to lead what's called our talent network. So I joined BGF back in May 2018, so about 6.5 years ago. Joined BGF and joined the talent network team. So our team support our portfolio businesses and our potential portfolio businesses by introducing them to non-executive talent. So we, I guess to give an idea of the volume, we're introducing between about 40 and 50 non-execs per year to our portfolio. So they are pre-investment scenarios where we're supporting businesses who are thinking about who they would like on their board for the journey, for their scale-up journey, and also really working closely with the existing portfolio. And as you know, we have a large portfolio, so trying to stay as close as possible to the existing portfolio to make sure that they have the right board composition from a non-exec perspective. So that's sort of, in summary, what we do.
And how big is the talent network? Like, how many people are you in touch with that you're thinking of?
So the total talent network is about 6,000 people, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But I guess just to give a bit of context around what the talent network is. So in its simplest terms, the talent network is our external network of board directors. So it's deliberately large and wide-ranging to reflect all the businesses that we're investing in. So we are pretty much sector agnostic, so we need non-execs, execs, that are representative of all of those sectors, and also different scale of businesses as well. So it is deliberately large, deliberately wide-ranging. My particular role, and actually when you think about talent network nowadays from BGF, it's more focused around that non-executive network. So the non-executive part of the wider network is less than 6,000, but given the scale of what we're doing, given the number of investments per year, we're actually in pretty regular contact with a lot of the non-execs in that network.
And what is the conversation that you have with somebody that's thinking about sort of taking investment? Like, when does that sort of start in the process? And I suppose it's one of the things that people taking investment, perhaps for the first time, get a little bit nervous about. I'm going to take money and I'm going to be told that I've got to have this person on my board, etc. How does it operate in reality?
It can be really daunting, right? So taking investment from anybody is a really big decision for a founder. We're often the first institutional investor, so it's a big decision. And then when you talk to them about also, needing to have an independent non-exec on their board, it can be quite daunting. I think, those founders that may be a little sceptical at the beginning is probably because they don't really understand the role of the non-exec and how they're there to support. So we almost become part of the deal team quite early on in those conversations. We meet management teams, founders, CEOs, maybe broader management team, and just think about the current board composition and how an independent non-exec could support that board going forward. Any potential gaps in skill set, experience, and how we can sort of plug the gap, I guess, with that non-exec. It's about building relationships, building the trust, talking around around the role of the non-exec, and even those most skeptical founders. Once you've had a couple of conversations with them around, the role, it's not daunting. This non-exec is non-exec, not exec. They're not going to come in and want to run the business for you. I think they become much more reassured. And then when you start talking through profiles, potential candidates with management teams, a lot of the time we get feedback such as, gosh, they won't want to work with my business, would they? And then actually they really would, because these are really successful, experienced board members, typically have been CEOs, founders themselves, that now want to build their non-exec portfolio and want to work with those scale-up businesses because they found it really exciting and agile.
And I suppose it's one of the things that people that want to raise money, often what they want to invest in is human capital, right? And they want to hire more people, etc. And actually, you're sort of, it's not only you getting a check potentially as well, but you're also getting kind of access and kind of like help to this like really interesting network of people that are doing it. There is a bit of a sort of assumption that the non-exec is, you know, a white male over the age of 50 that's got a finance background, right? But can you talk us through some of the other people and the other kind of assets and skills that are available through non-exec positions?
Absolutely. So it's interesting, the finance piece. So, you know, a lot of people would say you probably don't need more specific finance experience on the board because you have the BGF investor who typically comes, you know, with that finance background. And the business should and probably will have a really experienced FD, CFO on the board to take responsibility for the finances. Often we find the most useful, valuable non-execs come from functions such as sales and marketing. Yeah. Because often that is a position in the business that needs to be upskilled. Yeah. You know, it's a sales and marketing function where that chair can be most useful, rather than a former CFO. And don't get me wrong, we do have former CFOs in chair positions in our businesses because actually their experience is often much more broader than just the finance piece. But I think it's looking at each business individually, assessing the board composition in terms of what exists, what needs to exist going forward, to you know, for that scale up journey, and looking at what and who we can introduce, and the intention is that we introduce a variety of people for any particular non-exec role, and that's really important so that the founders, the management teams, have the choice. Yeah. And we can work together and prioritise what's really important. So if we're presenting a shortlist of, say, 6 or 8 people, they will look quite different in terms of their background, their skill set, their experience. And we will always encourage management teams to meet at least 2, if not 3, if not 4 people to really help them prioritise actually what's going to be important for their business going forward.
And what do you think makes a good non-exec person in terms of, like, for people that are thinking about this, thinking, oh, maybe I could actually sort of be part of the talent network, etc. Like, we've called it mainly from the business's point of view, but for the individuals that have perhaps exited a business or done something before, what makes a good non-exec person in your opinion?
So we support our businesses by introducing both non-exec chairs and non-exec directors, and the roles can be quite different. There are people that can fulfil both chair and any NED roles, but the way we approach it is that a non-exec chair is somebody who is going to be really engaged, spending 2, 3, 4 days a month with your business, depending on what's going on. And there's some, I guess, some sort of typical criteria that we look for from that non-exec chair. Sounds really simple, but someone who's been there and done it. Someone who's been there and done it, someone who's sat in that founder's, that CEO's shoes and scaled a business themselves. Someone that understands the opportunities, the challenges around scaling businesses from a people perspective, from a process perspective. And because they've been there and done it, they can build that really trusting relationship with CEO, the wider management team. We talk about that sounding board relationship a lot. And that sounding board relationship is absolutely key in a effective non-exec company relationship. So the chair is someone who's typically been there and done it, scaled a business as a CEO, if not a founder themselves. Also an element of experience of working in or with investor-backed businesses is often really useful. So again, you know, the founders, we typically haven't had the institutional investment before, so actually someone independent who's on their board who has had that experience is really valuable. And also someone who can help that business think about exits. So think about, you know, where is the exit? How do we get there? How do we keep aligned? As well as other capital events like fundraising, M&A, that kind of thing. So the chair profile is quite similar in a lot of sort of scenarios. And then you might want sector experience, you might not want sector experience, you might want complementary experience. It could be international growth, it could be product development. So that's the chair role. And then the non-exec director role is something we are actually going to be focusing on increasingly over the course of the next sort of 12 months and beyond. Because I think that creates huge opportunity for those people thinking about taking their first non-exec role.
Yeah.
So we are really committed to, and it also helps with diversity as well, right? So if we are broadening that pool of available talent, you're also increasing the chances of having that diverse talent join your boards. And because those non-exec directors are joining the board alongside typically a more experienced chair, we are more comforted and more reassured that the business and the board is sort of well represented. But those non-exec directors tend to be more functionally focused. So it could be somebody from a people background, could be someone from a tech background or an M&A background or an international growth background. But the key there is the opportunity to give people their first non-exec role, which we are super, super keen. And that contemporary experience brings a huge amount of value to the boards that we back.
How has the role of the board changed in the years that you've been doing this? What are your kind of observations on that?
I think, I guess for BGF boards, we've always needed non-execs that have been engaged, hands-on, have the ability to build those trusting relationships because we're backing primarily founder-led businesses. So that relationship point is really key. I think over the years, I guess the profile of the chair and the non-exec we're looking for has shifted slightly to those people that have that potentially that more recent executive experience. You think about, recent years working through COVID, et cetera, the change in the workforce and their expectations. I think, those people that have had exec roles during this time, actually that they make great non-execs because of that shift. So I think sort of the profile has changed slightly, and we are really welcoming introductions and meetings with more recently exited execs, if that makes sense. And I think there's just more scrutiny on boards nowadays, in terms of constantly making sure we have the right board composition.
Yeah.
But we are a patient investor, acknowledge that the board that's right on day one might not necessarily be the right board at the end of year 2, 3, 4, 5. So really keeping close to the portfolio to make sure we've still got the right board composition along the journey.
And one of the areas that perhaps is a clearest advantage and people can add is on the sort of international scaling side of things, which will almost factor in a lot of companies that are taking money will be thinking about that at some stage. You have a kind of like international advisory board. How does that work? So
we have, I guess as a starter, we have connections with BGF Australia, BGF Canada, and they are very similar businesses in terms of their investment model to BGF, and we sort of supported their development. So we have really good contacts in Australia and Canada. We also have some retained US advisors, and they're two chaps called Mike Kelly and Tom Newman. They make up Kelly Newman Advisors, and they are retained by BGF for a number of days per month. And they work with existing portfolio businesses primarily, but they can also work with sort of potential investee businesses as well. But most of their time is spent working with our existing portfolio. And those businesses that are looking to scale up into the US, and they have what's called the Scale Up US program. So work with businesses on a different levels. So some businesses might have a level of US exposure but want to increase that. Some people and some businesses might not have any exposure to the US but really want to try and tackle growth in the US, which, as we all know, is not easy.
Yes.
So having people on the ground in the US who understand that market, have amazing connections, really great network, has been super helpful to our portfolio businesses.
Have you got any case studies that you can share on sort of the international advisory boards or even the sort of non-exec chair roles that we were discussing before?
So interesting. So Mike Kelly, who is one half of Kelly Newman Advisors, actually sits on some of our boards. So he first joined the board of Unruly Media, which was one of BGF's first investments, and he sat on 2 or 3 boards since. So he is somebody who really understands the US, but from a UK perspective, and vice versa. So he's brilliant. We've also got a couple of
Unruly Media was acquired by News UK
yes,
as well.
Exactly.
A big sort of...
Exactly. That was great, and that was, I would say, one of BGF's first investments. So and we are looking to constantly build out our US and network, and actually beyond as well. So we've got the US advisory board, we've got the European advisory board, and APAC. I think the US is often talked about as, you know, the key growth area, but I think increasingly APAC is of interest to lots of businesses. So we are working closely to build out the network over there as well, because, you know, historically BGF Talent Network has been very UK and Irish focused, but we are really conscious that having people on the ground in different geographies is really important to our businesses. People who understand those local markets. So, you know, Sea Salt, for example, is in our portfolio. They have a US-based chair, a guy called Mike Harrison, who is super experienced in sort of the broad US consumer market. And as Sea Salt are looking to grow their business into the US, and they have stores over there now, he's been really helpful in sort of expanding that footprint.
Because that's it as well. So, I mean, Sea Salt will be a brand that, you know, quite a lot of people will be kind of familiar with, you know, Cornish clothing company, etc. But it's like scaling a business in the United States is completely different to the kind of like origin story of where something like that starts. And it's something that you just, you know, you need help with, right?
Absolutely. We might know where to start, but we wouldn't know as much as Mike does in terms of the local market. You know, where we opening that first store. You know, we have to be on the ground and understand that market to know that.
Yeah. And what do you think is the sort of, not the secret, but what makes a good board? Like, yeah, what should a sort of board provide? Because, you know, an entrepreneur, like you say, may have, you know, a board may be sort of put together over the course of the first few years, etc., and then kind of institutional investor comes in. What makes a good board at that stage? What are you telling the founders?
So alignment. So I think we talk about everyone needing to be aligned on that longer term strategy, and I think, you know, my view is that the one of the main purposes of the board is to make sure the business and everybody in that business is aligned on the longer term strategy. Where is the business trying to get to? Clearly, the board is there to make sure the business is well run from a governance perspective as well. When we talk about specifically the chair role on a board, and we talk about the chair almost being the anchor to that board and making sure that the business is well run from a governance perspective, but also focusing on people and strategy. So I think, you know, it's not just the chair's role, it's the whole board's role is to make sure that, you know, those 3 pillars are really focused on. So governance, you know, good board meetings, good board packs, good reporting, good processes, good structure. If that's done well, that shouldn't take too much time. Which leaves the rest of the board's time to think about people and strategy. And those two are obviously really closely aligned.
How often do you recommend the boards meet?
We recommend every month. But there are some businesses in our portfolio that meet quarterly, but there's always much more regular touch points. So, you know, formal board meetings most of the time every month. But with more regular check-ins, and then, you know, the chair CEO relationship is, you know, much more regular cadence of meetings and touch points and phone calls and, you know, all the rest of it.
And how, I mean, obviously that relationship between CEO and chairman is so important, and we've spoken to lots of people on the podcast that have done it and have sat either side of it. But as somebody who sort of observes it, what's your sort of like slightly outside view about what makes a good chair CEO relationship?
So it's really, so my colleagues at BGF will be sick of hearing me say the importance of the chair being low ego and high EQ. And I think if you have a chair or a non-exec, but especially a chair that's low ego but high EQ, I think you're almost halfway there in forming that really good relationship between CEO, founder and chair. The chair has to be really cognizant that the founder is the founder's baby, right? The business is the founder's baby, and it's a big step to let somebody independent, like a chair, onto their board, and it's also being cognizant that trust is not going to appear overnight. That they need to take the time, and they need to build that relationship and build that trust, so that the chair can become that trusted sounding board. And we talk about this sounding board relationship a lot, because actually what we hear from our CEOs is the best relationships are when they have the ability and that relationship, so they can call the chair at any time of the day, any time of the week, and say, have you got 10 minutes just to chat something through? I've got a live situation, live opportunity, what do you think? Rather than having to diarise a catch up for 2 weeks' time, because that's when it just does not work at all. So it's taking the time, it's acknowledging that it's going to take a bit of time to build that trust, to build that relationship. But then when you have got that relationship, it's brilliant. And chemistry and culture fit is something else that my colleagues are sick of probably me saying. The importance of chemistry and culture fit, given the businesses we're backing, that chemistry point is absolutely the top priority when thinking around actually who your chair is going to be. Anybody we introduce could do the role on paper. They've all got the necessary skill set, experience to do the role on paper. But we don't know if that chemistry is going to be there, if that culture fit is going to be right until we make the introductions. We have good idea, good guess, but we don't know for sure.
What's the best ways that you've seen chairs and CEO build that trusted relationship as quickly as possible? Like what can be done to achieve that?
Spending time. It is spending time. And I think, that's why when we are meeting people and bringing people into our network to think about potential chair roles, we have to be really sure that those people are going to be engaged, they've got the time available. We are absolutely not looking for someone to turn up once a month to the board meeting. That just does not work whatsoever. Yeah. So the bar's pretty high now in terms of people that we meet that we think actually we'd be comfortable putting you forward for a chair role in our portfolio. But it just does come down to time. It comes down to the culture fit initially and the chemistry. If that's not there from day one, it's probably not going to work longer term. But if you've got the chemistry, you've got the culture fit, it's about spending time. It's about spending time in a formal scenario, informal, social, go for breakfast, go for lunch, go for dinner. Meet the rest of the team, make yourself available and present in the business. Go and meet, the people on the shop floor or the people in the office. But again, it's a fine line, isn't it, between non-exec and being non-exec. So someone a while ago made a really good point. They said, look, it's their view as being an effective chair is knowing enough to be useful, but not enough to be a nuisance. And I think that sums it up quite well. And it's that fine balance between, as I say, non-exec and exec. And when we want our chairs to be engaged and involved, but not so that they become a nuisance to the exec team.
Have you got any favourite chair CEO? Have you got any favourite chair founder relationships, duos?
I think you actually just interviewed and Andy McRae recently. Actually, Andy's a brilliant chair. So we've worked with Andy numerous times now. He sat on a number of BGF boards, and he is very, very good at building those relationships quickly. Because he's straight talking, but super personable, really just truly interested, really cares. And he's genuinely working with these businesses because he cares, because he wants to make a difference and add value. And I think you can just see that when you work with these people. that they actually want to be working with scale-up businesses because, you know, they're not the easiest businesses to work with sometimes because, you know, the growth is not necessarily a straight line all the time, but they enjoy working in those sort of founder-led environments which are exciting and agile.
Yes, I only met Andy on Friday and I already feel like he's a friend. Here we are recording on Wednesday.
Yes.
And can you talk to us a little bit about the kind of like, we've touched on it a bit already, but the importance of diversity and the idea that often founders, when building boards, building their initial teams, will inevitably reach towards their local networks, etc., people they've worked with before. But when you take the institutional money, there's other responsibilities that come along as well. So what is the importance of diversity to a board?
I think, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's pretty obvious that having a diverse board is valuable because you have diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of challenge, and you have different people around the table who think slightly differently, who can all input to better board decision making. There are people that I guess didn't quite see the importance of diverse boards, but actually I think more recently it has been proven that having a diverse board creates better financial outcomes at exit. So I think for those skeptics out there, I think, you know, even this sort of data that's showing having a diverse board creates the better financial outcomes is what they've needed to see to take it seriously. We are big believers that having diverse boards is something that we should be, focused on and increasingly focused on. We have started to track actually. So, you know, we've sort of started to think about how could we take control, how can we influence diverse boards at BGF. So as of last year, we started to track and formally track diversity, gender diversity on our non-exec shortlists. So every shortlist we create and present, we've been tracking, is there gender diversity on there? So as of pretty much this time last year, I think 79% of our shortlists had an element of gender diversity. It's up to 90% as of now.
Oh, wow.
So we are really focused on, trying to increase the diversity from a non-exec perspective as an area that we, clearly have a level of influence. There is a wider discussion around the pool of diverse talent and what we can do to widen that pool. So to my earlier point around introducing more non-exec directors, that I think is a really straightforward way of us introducing more diversity to our portfolio boards, which, again, gives people their first, second, third non-exec role, which builds their experience so that over time they can become chairs. At the moment, the criteria for being a chair in the BGF portfolio is that been there, done it as a CEO and as a founder, worked with investor-backed businesses, been through the exit journey, which does reduce that pool somewhat. So what we need to really do is think about actually which of those criteria can be flexed so that we give our portfolio more access to diverse talent. And clearly I'm talking around gender diversity quite a lot here because that's the most easily recognisable diversity characteristic. We are, however, much more focused on other diversity characteristics, so socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicity, and that's a big area of focus for us next year as well. I think in a nutshell, diverse boards, absolutely we should all be doing as much as we possibly can to make sure they're as diverse as possible.
I'm really interested in the socioeconomic one. Like, how do you because I feel that's kind of like the next phase of diversity, and it's diversity you can't really see or easily assess, etc. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on just how you're planning on going about that in the next year and the workings behind it. So
you're right, it's not easy. So we are trying to work out a way that we can assess and track that specific diversity characteristic. So I'm part of BGF's Diversity Action Group. So that's an internal BGF working group, and we all come from different parts of the business, and we all have different objectives. So my objective as part of my group, unsurprisingly, is increasing diversity on portfolio boards. But there are other people in the business, in the group, that are focused on actually how do we track diversity characteristics more generally, both in the businesses we're looking to invest in, the management teams, the boards, and there are tools out there that other people, I think, are starting to think about using.
What is there any reading for anyone that's thinking about being a non-exec, like that they can go and do? Are there sort of resources that you point people to? And likewise for founders that are thinking of building a board for the first time, is there any kind of particular things that you would recommend they read?
Do you know what? There's a real shortage. Unsurprisingly, I've been asked this a few times. Asked, are there any courses that people can do to sort of embark on their non-exec journey? There are a couple. So the IOD do run a couple of courses around that non-exec director sort of roles and responsibilities, but it's quite governance focused. I would say the best route is to speak to people, meet people that are already doing those roles. Talk to them. Talk to people that are currently working as non-execs, non-exec chairs, directors, advisors, and speak to as many of them as you possibly can, around, where do they spend their time? What are the challenges? Why do they enjoy it?
I often think it's just one of the most interesting sort of roles and things that BGF can add to people over other kind of institutional money that's out there. This real practicality in terms of board building and talent, etc. Are there any other sort of final bits of advice that you would want to pass on? What are the sort of most frequently asked questions that we haven't gone over in this interview?
Just more of an observation, actually, and actually probably to those people thinking of embarking on their non-exec journey, there has been a shift, I think, over the last sort of 10 years or so, in terms of when people are thinking about moving to that sort of portfolio career. I think historically people had sort of retired and I thought, how can I keep busy? I'll do a couple of non-exec roles. Whereas actually now people are thinking about making that change much earlier in their career.
Right.
So actually wanting the variety of working with different businesses, different people, but whilst they've still got tons of energy, tons of relevant experience. So actually that's been a big shift. Yeah. So, the average age, I guess, of people thinking about shifting to that portfolio career and building a number of maybe consultancy, advisory, non-exec roles has come down, which I think is brilliant for the businesses that we're backing in terms of that contemporary relevant experience.
Brilliant. Sophie, thanks very much for coming on the BGF Good Growth podcast.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Good Growth podcast. If you enjoyed that, make sure to hit subscribe so you're the first to hear about new episodes. And always stay up to date on the latest growth insights.